Breakfast with Refilwe
on Cape Talk.
Christelle, welcome back and good Monday to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on your show, Refilwe.
Always a pleasure. All right. So, it's very difficult for us to navigate. We have enough on our plates with respect to the expenditure side of our income statements. And, our listeners were very frustrated last week, not only from the fact that we've got a return of scheduled load shedding, even when we're not even operating the economy at full capacity, but that so much of it got out of whack. You protracted periods of lack of power, and we got phone calls saying, what am I going to do with all these groceries? Are there any clauses within our insurance policies, for example, that cover this, or is this something that one could or should take up with the utility?
Let's start with the first part of the question around insurance. So, as a general rule, insurance is there for sudden and unforeseen events. But the question around the rotting of food in the freezer or in the fridge is that's generally covered by most personal insurance policies. It really does depend on the kind of the cover that you've taken out, but certainly from an old mutual insurer perspective, our policies would all cover you if you submit a claim due to your power being off for much longer, because it does take quite a bit of time for the food to go off in the fridge. What we do see is when people go away for the weekend, there's load shedding, at their home, and for some other reason, when the power comes back on, your electricity trips. Then you would typically, see claims being submitted. The risk that we see most actually is the power surges, because the power comes back on and it comes on with a surge, and that causes very extensive electrical damage to phones that are on charge, your electronic equipment like your TVs and even your fridges, anything that's plugged in. And in the Western Cape, we're not used to having these power surge protection units on our plugs. They do that often in Gauteng and areas of high lightning. So that's where we see a lot of claims, is actually the power surges that actually damage causes quite extensive damage, but that's covered.
I was about to ask then, okay, so you don't expect any policyholder to necessarily own power surge protection units?
When you live in a high lightning area, we would sometimes, if you've had a multiple of claims, we would instruct individual policyholders to install these power surge protection units. And we do actually, at the moment, also advise all our policyholders to do it. It's very simple, not expensive. And even if you have cover in terms of your policy, it's always a mission to claim and go through that whole process. So it's much better to be proactive and to protect your electronic equipment. So I would most certainly advise that you install those power surge protection. And if you don't have the resources or the time to go and buy them, very simple. It's just to switch off all your electronic items hours before the load shedding starts, and switch them back on, at the wall plug when the electricity comes back on. So then you'll be sure. And don't put your phone on charge, or don't leave it on charge. That happens often. But Refilwe, we've also seen some very big fires as a result of load shedding. The biggest fire that I actually dealt with over the years was in Nettleton Road in Cape Town. It was an 18 million rand fire. Yes, it actually
that was just the storeroom.
Yes, it was actually just the electronics, but it was the generator, the switch between the generator and the mainline power. When the power came back on, the owners weren't home, and that switch caught alight, and it actually all the electronics fried in the house. It burnt, and extensive smoke damage as well. So, and then someone who was drying their hair and left the hairdryer on the bed, didn't switch it off, went out when the power didn't come back on. Bed caught alight, whole house burned down. So it actually causes quite serious damage. We just don't know about it always.
Indeed.
So make sure you've got fire cover and power surge cover when it comes to your personal insurance policy.
For sure. Okay, so two things. How do I prove, for example, how do I prove the link between the surge and the damage to my electronics? Do I need to go through an extensive proving process, or do insurers generally, understand and believe that?
Well, I can't speak for all the insurance companies, because we do have some insurance companies in the market that aren't that, great, I would say. But reputable insurance companies will just look at the load shedding schedule. It's very easy nowadays to to prove that that's what happened. And the kind of claim that's submitted, normally we know by now, because it's been how many, 10, 12 years. We know that this is the kind of claim that would happen as a result of load shedding.
Okay.
So, but you have to check that you've got power surge cover. Refilwe, I just want to make that clear, because a lot of insurers actually limit that cover. And for me, that's a big deal. If your house burns down as a result of power surge damage, you need to have full cover, the full sum insured. So ask your insurance company if they provide power surge cover as part of your homeowners and household contents insurance.
And finally, out of interest, you know, the story about the generator and the mainline power, and then the story about the hairdresser, maybe not in the former, but certainly in the latter, there seems to be a bit of negligence. I mean, does that sort of stand against me in my claim?
Well, you know, that was an honest mistake. I mean, the person just didn't know that, she didn't realize that the hairdryer was still on.
Got you.
So you can't, you know, that claim was absolutely covered and it was paid out. So
okay, that's good to know. All right. Well, Christelle, as always, massively more knowledgeable about this than before we began speaking to you. Christelle Colman is our insurance expert at Old Mutual Insure, helping us understand our rights and some responsibilities that we need to take up with respect to electricity and our electrical appliances. Thanks so much for joining us this Mula Monday.
Thank you.
All right then.